All right, this morning there's a parable Jesus talked about that I thought was all like in all the Gospels and all until I was studying it this morning and found out it was just in Matthew, and it's right after he does the parable of the seeds, where he's going around and he's sowing it. Well, the first thing that I was looking at was one that Jesus was using these things that people would normally know about. He wasn't trying to get on a theological level with them. He wasn't trying to get on, hey, I'm smarter than you level. But he was breaking it down into the, hey, we're country people. This right here is something that you can understand. Because if you go to a church, if you go to a meeting, if you go to a class, and they're teaching you something with all these big words that you're trying to fumble through your phone with a dictionary and try to figure out what in the world they're trying to say, you're not going to be hearing the rest of the sentence or the rest of the message. You're going to be trying to dissect what they're saying. And Jesus wasn't like that. So I don't know why people think that we have to pay a lot of money to become like that. But he was like, reach the people where they are, talk to them where they are. It's not like you're talking down to them, but you're talking in an understandable way because you want them to know something. And so he did the same thing like with farmers. He did it with the seed. So over in Matthew 13, he starts out, he's talking about the seed. If you go around, you throw these seeds just any way, some of them's not going to go into the ground. It's going to go on rocks. The bird's going to get them. It's going to go in the weeds, and they're going to be choked out. And some will go on the good ground. And depending on where it lands, depends on how it's going to come. Same with the word. He was, and everybody can know that. You can picture it in your head exactly what he's talking about. And that's how he met them where they were. They didn't have to come find him in some building or house trying to, hey, teach me. Like we want to go into a church building and say, they can come hear the word. That's not that. We're supposed to be taking it to them. Go out there and meet them. Let them know the good news. Hey, look, God loves you. There is hope for every one of us. That was the true meaning. That's the reason why he said, take the word out. Take it to Jerusalem, and Judea, Samaria, and then to the earth, to the rest of the world. Get those right there in the area first. Get them in the culture and the generation, in your friend group, the ones that you speak like, the one that will understand you. Try to offer it them first. Try to reach them because you're going to know more about where they're at. They're going to know you. And a lot of times we want to stay like, well, this right here is who I am, this is who I've always been. But you're not going to be able to reach somebody if you're getting on up in age and everybody else is going with these technologies, cell phones, and you're still using a landline, have no idea what in the world a smartphone is. You can't relate to them. You can't. You're not being able to talk to them. They're going to see somebody with an older tradition who's trying to tell them, do this, don't do that. Instead of teaching them where they can learn and they go back to the source, which is God, not me, not anyone else, and learn straight from him. But so as we communicate, we should be communicating with the people as they will understand. And that's what he was doing here. But in Matthew, they put out this other parable, and it's all the tares, the wheat and the tares. And these kind of people back in this area, they would have understood this tremendously. Starting at verse 24 of chapter 13, it says, he presented another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat, and went away. But when the wheat sprang up and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, an enemy has done this. And the slaves said to them, do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, no. Lest while you are gathering up the tares, you may root up the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, first, gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn. All right. Wheat and tares. They look a whole lot alike. You got the wheat that as it gets ripe and time to bear fruit, it bows down. Just like somebody that's wanting to be upright with God and wants to be ripened in their faith, they bow down before Him and not stands up with pride. The tares, another name was darnel, I think it was. Darnel. Anyway, they stand up straight and they're also poisonous to eat. They look the same. They grow up same kind of stalk as the wheat when they're younger. They get the fruit that they bear is not good to eat, and it's not as full. The roots underneath the ground, they go wider and tangle up with the wheat. And then whenever the all springs up, you can tell by the way they act, the color they are. But it's hard, and especially when you're out there, you don't have all these equipment and all. You're out there, hands, one at a time, trying to sift through. Now, this is actually a technique that armies would do. The one place to try to get your enemy is to try to ruin their food, their crop. So they would go in, if they would send people in to actually go at night and throw in these darnel or these weeds that looks just like the wheat all throughout the field. So when it comes up, they won't have as much. Maybe it'll choke them out. And once they see it, they start ripping them out. Being they look so much alike, you're able to get the good with the bad. Also, once the roots entangle, you can pull them both out. And if you were to mess up the roots, then you'll be hurting the good. We find that a lot throughout the whole Bible, Old Testament, New Testament. You have these false prophets that come and they want to be picked up high, saying, look at me. We find that one of them came to Paul and Barnabas over in Acts 13, saying, hey, give me this, give me that, teach me this. After money, he's also already said he was a false prophet, trying to get them to come to him and listen to him, so he had a big head. And let me tell you something, if this word is from God and everything we get is supposed to be from God, then nothing that I say or anybody else says should be accredited to us, but it should be all going back to God, because His word, not ours. There is nothing that can come from it unless He gives it growth. So that's when we go and we witness to someone, God opens the door for you to talk to somebody, or God brings somebody into your life that's watching you. Everything that you do is because God has enabled you to be there, so you can talk to them, so you can try to reason with them, so you can try to bring them up, build them up, show them love, because that right there is what John tells us in 1 John of the difference between a child of God and a child of the world. There's only two. There's no in between. It's like the child of God, you're going to be able to tell because they are full of love to one another. And not a love like, hey, I love you. No, love out as a deed. You go and you're trying to do something with them. You're helping them. You see them hurt. You're trying to pick them up. You're trying to comfort them when they're down. Not one that's just wants to talk and mock people behind their back, or wants to blend in with the world because you don't want nobody talking about you. But you're standing up apart, not because you want to say, look at me with a three-piece suit up here. Forget that. A three-piece suit, I got like 3 degrees. They mean nothing. The only thing they do is enable me to be where God can use me. But once I put those degrees up here and God's word down here, then I've already taken him out, and now it's all about me, and now I'm with the world. Now I'm becoming a terror. I have separated myself from God. But that word should be up here. And these degrees are only a vehicle, only the thing to carry me to get to where God can use me other places. It is never about me. It is never about what I can hang on the wall. your degrees, whether it's a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate, wherever it may be, no matter how many years you got into preaching or counseling, no matter what someone calls you, you can call yourself an apostle or reverend or whatever in the world you want to call yourself. It doesn't mean a hill of beans, just like what Paul said, which was called by God, by Jesus himself, says that if I go and I proclaim all of this stuff, I even offer myself to be a martyr if I don't do it out of love. If I don't love people, then it's meaningless. It has no effect. Same thing with here. Dress myself up in a three-piece suit. I start speaking with all these big words so that nobody can understand me, but they know that I have a little bit of knowledge behind me. I'm not just an old country boy, right? I'm trying to do better than my upbringing. I have all these degrees behind me. I start saying I'm Dr. So-and-so. That's just like makeup trying to hide the real self. Once you go, sooner or later, it's going to have to come off. And once we stand before God, we'll be torn out just like the tares. Doesn't matter if you're in a seminary, doesn't matter if you're in church, doesn't matter if you're talking to your best friend. The Bible was written over a period of 1,500 years. 66 different books. 40 different people used to write it down, but only one author. So the meaning behind what is written is the same from Genesis to Revelation. And if it's the same for all those 1,500 years, throughout all the different generations, before, during, and after Jesus Christ came down to make a way for us, then that means to me that it's still the same today. The same meaning that is put in there is still the same today. It doesn't matter what my parents, my teachers, my pastors, or anyone else, it doesn't even matter what I think. What matters is what God thinks. So, and as we get right, as we start producing, and as we start doing fruit, we have to realize, are we being a tear? Are we being poisonous to others around us and to our own self? Or are we being fruitful? Are we being that wheat? Are we picking people up? Are we telling them the truth about gospel? How are they looking at our lives? Because they will look at us. They will try to see, okay, how are they living? And if they see that we're able to cuss, we're able to lie, we're able to go out drinking or doing drugs, or we're able to do all this other stuff just like they're doing, then what in the world can they say is different about us than the world? Why in the world, what Paul says to Peter, which was one of the top three, because we all fall short at times. He tells him in Galatians chapter 2, if you're going to act like them of the world, but yet you're going to claim to be saved and holy, separate from the world, but living for God, but yet you act like them, why should they do any different? For what reason should they change? Why should they seek God if they can just say, I'm a good person, I believe what you're saying is true, I can go to heaven now? Okay, let's go partying. You know, it seems like that's what a lot of people think about church a lot of times. They can go, say amen a few times, and go out and live however they want. But that's not what he says. That's the whole reason behind the laws in the Old Testament. It wasn't to say, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do that. But it was a way to show them, have compassion, have love for one another. Separate yourself from the world for righteousness' sake. Not to say that you're holier and better than others, but to say that if you want to honor God, then you need to live with a purpose. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. But have clean fun. Have good fun. First miracle Jesus did was change water into wine at a wedding, just saying. And whether you believe in drinking wine or don't, hey, we ain't touching on that. But, you know, it was at a celebration, which means we can still have fun. We can still celebrate. It's just be responsible and have it in a holy manner, a righteous manner, whenever you do these things. Be mindful of how far you allow yourself to go, because one of the things that it takes, that Peter tells us in 2 Peter chapter 1, is self-control. It's one of the steps that we have to get and have to conquer to get closer to Him. And Paul tells us about self-control several times as well in his writings. The first thing we have to do is get knowledge about Him. And that comes from reading His Word. Not just saying, I believe, and putting the Bible down and going and listening to others. Don't listen to me. Listen to Him. Listen to what the prophet said. Listen to what Jesus said to us through them. A few references. 1 John, the whole book of 1 John, it talks about love. It talks about telling the difference between the world and God. Because at the end, there can only be, are you serving God or are you serving the world? That is it. 1 John 3:10 says, by this the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. And if we break it on down, we find that a little bit further in that book, we find out that His commandment, the commandment of God, is love. We go back over to 1 Corinthians 13, is where Paul's talking about, if I don't have love, then I have nothing. Doesn't matter what I do for everybody else. If I don't do it in love, then it's meaningless. And I also want to remind everybody that these letters that we're studying, that we're reading about, they were written to churches. They were written to people that knew God, that already knew the gospel, already said they believed. They're written to people who have said, yes, I believe Jesus is the Son of God. But then they wanted to bring in their own personal thoughts and opinions and try to mix and mingle it with the scriptures that was being taught. They were being tares. That's what was happening in Galatians, the reason in Acts, the reason why Paul had to go back to Jerusalem and say, hey, look, this right here is happening. I need to find out exactly what we're going to stand on for the gospel. And then he wrote Galatians to actually go out to all the churches in Galatia while he was telling them what they had said. John is writing to people that knew God. And he says that, I'm not telling you anything that you didn't already know. You already know this. But the reason why he's telling them is because there's false teachers off the word out there trying to kill and steal, just like their master, which is the devil. They're trying to destroy the good seed. They're trying to choke them out. Whenever we find out that, hey, we became prey to this, guess what? We have somebody on our side that can come to our aid, that can come back and pull us back out, that can doctor us up, give us a little fertilizer if we need it. Because God never leaves us. He loves us. He wants us to be with Him. We are none perfect. We will none be perfect. I don't care who we are. I don't care how long we've been serving Him. We were not saved by our own self. We were not saved by our acts, even though others watch them. But we were saved by His grace and His love, just like everyone else. That way we can't boast of this. The love that we have, we only have because He loved us first. And that's what He calls on us to give others. And by that love and that act to others, the world can see His love for them through us. That's when we become fruitful. That's whenever we bow down before Him to serve others, not to stand up with pride. So the message here is there's a lot of wheat, there's a lot of tares. The tares are trying to choke out all the wheat that they can. And you'll see them right there beside the Christians, right there in the church. Sometimes we'll see it in our own self. The only way we can know the difference is to study. Take time to study. Just like I didn't know the difference in how the tares looked next to the wheat until I actually did research so I can get knowledge myself. Had no idea about the roots until I looked at research, just so I can see exactly how they look under the ground. I've never had to walk out there, so I don't know what it's like to sift through all of them with your hands and knees for days, cutting out the bad, and then going and getting the good. They did. Whenever Jesus walked the earth, whenever He gave this parable, they knew. They experienced this every year. Susan B. Anthony had a quote here I wanted to pass on. Susan B. Anthony said that God allows the wheat and the tares to grow up together, and the tares frequently get the start of the wheat and kill it out. The only difference between the wheat and human beings is that the latter have intellect and ought to combine and pull out the tares, root, and branch. Very good statement. One of those key things that she said was combine. Whenever we isolate ourselves and we're surrounded by the tares, it's a lot easier for them to suck the nutrients out of the ground around us. It's a lot easier for them to hide all the sun from us. It's a lot easier for us to fall by the wayside till we're like really just laying on the ground. But if we come together with fellowship, and it does not even have to be in a building, it can be in a park somewhere or at the lake, wherever it is, just come together, talk about God. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'll be in the midst, is what God says. So what if we come together, just 2 of us, just 3 of us, and we start talking about God, giving Him thanks, and start sharing what we've learned in the Bible, we're having church. That is church right there. The real meaning behind the Greek word church is a gathering of people of the same for a common cause. It had nothing to do with God, the actual word church then, when it's written in the New Testament. It had everything to do with how they were coming together. And if we come together to seek knowledge of God, and we're doing our part to get that knowledge ourselves, then we can get the tares out of our own life, and we can separate ourselves from the tares of the world. And only by then can we be a light for the world. Very last verse, one that I always used to tell my daughter, so she knows it by heart. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Be ye not deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals." If I'm trying to be righteous, but I see a friend over there that I want to be friends with, I want to be close with them because they make me feel good. They probably might have said some flowery words or something. So, but I know that they're not living for God. So I'm going over there because I want to be with them. Their actions are going to start rubbing off on me. So regardless of how I want to be holy and righteous and set apart, the way I talk, some of the ways I act, the slang that I use is going to start mimicking them. Everybody in the world that sees me is going to see me living just like them. I've already walked away from who I was supposed to be separated for God. Now, if I'm nice to them, if I show them kindness, but yet I stay over here, and they see the kindness and the love from God that I'm showing them when I'm around them, I'm not trying to talk about them because God never called us to talk about anyone. So they start coming to me because everybody wants to be loved. True love. Not love of the world, but truly loved, cared about, with hope. And they come to me because they see something different about me than the worldly friends that they had that turned their back on them. Then my ways can rub off on them. That's the difference. Too many times we want to please the world, or we want to get a name where the world is looking more at, oh, look at them. Rather than, you can talk about me all you want, but I still forgive you and I still love you. And there's still hope for you because the same one that died for me died for you. And I was right there where you are, no matter where you're at. Once we get in that mentality, then we can actually do something. Then we can start being more the wheat. I've heard a lot of arguments about the letters of the churches in Revelation. Revelation 2 and 3, it has these letters to churches. They say specific churches. But I would like to counter that and say that every single letter in here was to a church or to a group of people. That was not us. But the meaning still stands today. And that is, no matter what prayer you may have said, if it was not in your heart, then it was just words. If your actions do not represent what's supposed to be in your heart, then it's not in your heart. It's not for me to judge. And I'm not judging, I'm just trying to make people aware. Because the day is going to come whenever we stand before the judge, and he will judge. And he will say, I gave you my word. You did or did not read it. You did or did not obey it. You did or did not honor me as your God. You did or did not show my love to others and how you're supposed to live. So if there's any tears in your life, then find some place to pray, because we never know when it's our last day. We never know when we'll be driving down the road and this is the last message that we say, or the last time we talk to someone. So if there is tears in our lives, let's get it out. Let's ask God to help root those things out so we can be fruitful just like wheat before him. And that's my message, the wheat and the tares. May God bless. Oh, last thing. I love in Colossians where it says, don't be deceived by man's philosophy. The philosophy it talks about is man's wisdom, man's logic, because man's going to come at you all kind of questions, logical, trying to take you away, trying to reason with your foundation to get you to doubt. But there is no amount of logic that can tell me how whoever wrote the book of Job knew that there were springs in the bottom of the sea, whenever we did not have the capability of finding out there were springs in the bottom of the sea until the 1970s AD. Nor Jonah that there was mountains and hills on the ocean floor. And several other things, like with Isaiah, where it talks about the world being circled. There's so much more nuggets that he has put in there to show us this knowledge that man did not have, could not have or understand. But the one that created all was speaking through them to us. So let's go back to the source. Let's get back right with the source. May God bless.